Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. We're back with Patti Handy. This is Tim Blanchard with Divorce 661. Patti Handy with Minding Her Money, also a financial coach. Today we're going to be talking about how to live your ultimate retirement after divorce. And Patty's going to tell us of all kinds of things you never heard about ever. It'll be secrets only that she knows. So uh, if you better pay attention because otherwise you're going to miss it. And then we're going to also talk about quadros, qualified domestic relation orders, and different ways you can divide up your pensions, and what people do if you're thinking about going through divorce. How you doing today, Patty?
I'm doing great, Tim. Yeah, all these secrets that I have, huh? Oh boy. You set me up. You
I
set me up
I've
there.
been doing these taking these training on how to better do video, and it says you have to throw out these hooks.
Ah,
You got
yeah.
to hook them. So that's all I could come up with. I hope they feel
Okay.
hooked.
All right. Stick around. We have some fun here.
Yeah. So, what do you got for us as far as when it comes to retirement, when it comes to what you do in coaching widowed and divorced women? I'm sure you have some tips and strategies and tactics and considerations people should have in helping your coaching clients.
Yeah, we'll kind of break it down. This is sort of a global conversation. When you're dealing with the divorce or widowed side, you also are addressing the fact that they're typically going to be alone, and so there's whether a man's alone or a woman's alone, you're dealing with some other unique issues. But kind of high level, we'll start there, and then we'll kind of break it down. But studies have shown that those who retire and then end up hanging out at home watching TV, not being social, not getting out in the community, not having a purpose, not getting up and going somewhere, suffer much greater depression and anxiety than those that are actively involved and have a purpose. So you can certainly be retired, leaving your job, your 9 to 5, but if you are not getting up and having a purpose, somewhere to go, something to do, someone to see, it definitely affects your psyche. So, and that's like as I said, that's across the board, whether you're dealing with a man or a woman.
I wrote down no purpose equals anxiety. My
Yes.
wife was just sharing an article she read over the weekend. It was talking about couples in their, and not necessarily divorce, but couples in their 70s, I want to say, who they moved out of country to live nearby their kids. But they're talking about, lack of friends and but also that they had retired and that they wish they hadn't fully
Mhm.
retired because they realized how money doesn't really go as far as they thought it would, especially maybe in higher priced areas, but that they wish they would have kept their connections specifically with their um, employer or people that they were working with, so maybe they could get some type of, maybe not go back to work full time, but get some contracting jobs or something like that, as opposed to just totally disconnecting from their employer and work in general.
Yeah, 100%. I think that is absolutely true. I've read variations of that in the past. And I think that if you are open to working part time or doing freelance or opening up your own little business, being a consultant, doing something that is going to keep you active mentally, feeling fulfilled, feeling impactful, the mental stimulation is super important. The critical thinking piece is important, and you're continually learning, that just keeps the mind active. But it also, like you said, the financial piece, um, social security alone isn't going to cut it. And if you start to pull from your assets, your portfolio, that's going to dwindle down. And if you can let that continue to grow even for a few more years, and by working part-time, that's certainly going to help that situation. But there's so many pieces to this. I mean, there's the mental, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual. I mean, there are so many pieces to that retirement, and we all think, oh, I can't wait to 65, and I'm not sure who came up with that number, but 65, I'm going to retire, and then everything's going to be fantastic, and that's just not the case. We see people working later and later because they just want to.
Yeah, I think it would be odd. I mean, I'm sure at first maybe that it would feel like you have plenty to do, go to the gym, all the things you didn't have time to do before, and all that. But I wonder if that kind of plays itself out after maybe 6 months or a year, that you realize, okay, that's not totally fulfilling anymore. It was more like a a dream, that you had or you'd conjured up in your mind that was going to be how to live your best life. But do you think there's like a time frame people go through and realize, oh man, kind of like this article that we were reading over the weekend, that they have these considerations on their decisions?
Yeah, it depends on what they have going outside, in their world. If they've got grandkids and they've got other things that are keeping them busy, that length of time might be longer. But if they are just, by themselves and they're just sitting around the house, yeah, at 6 months or maybe even sooner, where they just come to the realization like, okay, the novelty is worn off. I've gone to the gym, I've done what I want to do, and now I still have 6 hours left in my day. What am I going to do? And it's like, okay, I need to find something that's going to, you know, again, feel purposeful, even if it's volunteering for an hour a day. I mean, just do something. But if you completely retire, people are going back to work, and they are going back part time. And I'm seeing people working into their 70s and 80s. I mean, as long as they're physically active and they can physically do it. I mean, look at Warren Buffett. God bless him. He's
Yeah.
in his mid 80s and he's killing it. So
We have a couple of neighbors. We've had 3 or 4 now that have retired in either the last 5 years and 2 or 3 that have retired in the last 6 months. And the one that has been retired for the longest, for 5 years, and I would say she's in her mid 60s, was recently, I guess, talking to us, saying that she's considering calling back her employer, not to go back to work, but kind of like what we just mentioned, to do some type of contract work, so some kind on her time, just
mhm,
to do something.
yeah.
And I have another neighbor that's retired on the other side of that 6 months ago. I don't know if she can keep up her pace, but she's mountain biking and traveling, and if, you can do that as long as money permits, I suppose, right? There's gonna
Yeah.
eventually, depending, hit some limitations.
Yeah, and there are those that are doing that and just loving the traveling and loving that freedom, and that is fantastic. It's hard to say how long that will go. I mean, you can just um, do that for so many years, but yeah, the financial piece is certainly a factor. What's nice about that piece, though, those that are traveling and, like you said, mountain biking and doing that, there's social interaction,
Mm.
and the social interaction is so important. And typically, the workplace was the primary source because you're there all day, every day for 5 days a week. And so those friends that you left, you start to miss them. And it's like, wow, I don't have conversations the way I used to have. And that is so important, just to be mentally engaged with friends, and not just talk about work stuff, but just talk about life. And so if you're involved with mountain biking, or if you're involved with a hiking group, or you're traveling with a bunch of friends, I mean, that social interaction is super important. So like you said, as long as the finances, can keep up with it, then that's fantastic.
Yeah. You know, I don't know if you had some other things you wanted to discuss first, but I just, when you were talking about, like, we were talking about money running out or that sort of thing, just the difference between like a pension and a 401k. Pensions, you get a certain amount, I would imagine, until you died, and what that is. So you do have kind of a fixed income, kind of like when you were working, maybe not 100%, but maybe close, depending on how you did that. To where, and the reason I bring this up is because, like, with the 401k, there's not many, I shouldn't say there's not many people, but there's less and less folks that have traditional pensions, and they're more 401ks. I don't know that I'd want to. I mean, obviously you need to at a certain age. I think it's requirement, but to start drawing down and seeing the balance of a 401k drop, unlike a pension, right? That's going to have a consistent dollar amount. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's your own money you put in for the most part. And as you're dwindling down your savings, realizing how much longer do I have to live versus how much more money do I have left?
Yeah, so when you leave your company, if you have a pension, and yeah, there are fewer and farther, those aren't as common as they are, what they, decades ago, but you are given a choice of how to take it, as far as the percentage for to your spouse, if there's survivor benefits, and you decide, which one you want, and you have a fixed number, and then you know what that is. So there's a guaranteed income, if you will. Plus, your Social Security, and if you have rental income or any other sources, all of what's coming in, which is very important because you know what's going out potentially, and then you determine if there's that gap. The other piece about taking the portfolio. So to your point, I'll pivot for a second. Yes, there are what's called RMDs. So it was age 72. It just got changed to age 73. And at age 73, for a traditional IRA, you have to start taking withdrawals every year. It's not required with a Roth IRA. Another beautiful thing about Roths, you don't need to have, there's no RMD for Roths. So for a regular IRA, then you are required to take a percentage, and it's a convoluted calculation, but you are required to take some money out every single year from that. It's basically the government saying, okay, you've been deferring this long enough. We want our money now. So you take it. You can turn around and invest it back into a brokerage account, or spend it or use it or whatever. But yes, you do have to start to draw that down. Yeah, and it is kind of hard, but that's part of the plan. That's why sitting with an advisor is important. You kind of determine, okay, here's what that looks like, and what does my plan look like, if it's healthy or not, if I continue to pull down X number of dollars. We had some clients that were, I think I might have shared this in a prior episode, but for those of us who are watching this one, who had pension, Social Security, rental income, and that source of income was, more than sufficient, substantially more than what they needed to pay their household. So they had their same lifestyle. They still, paid everything in the home, and they were still positive cash flow, very, very comfortably. And that didn't require them to pull from that 401k or IRA or anything else. So that is a beautiful thing. So the size of their portfolio per se isn't as important, because they're constantly positive cash flow, and unless they were putting on a big huge wedding or doing a major travel trip or something like that, they weren't going to tap into that retirement funds. But the financial stability piece is important. The other moving part to that I'll share as well is Social Security. So if you are working and you have some kind of income, and you don't need to pull Social Security, the longer you wait, the better. Every year you wait after age 62, you are guaranteed that 8% increase every single year. And that's on top of the COLA, which is the cost of living. So
Really?
yeah. So if you have, if you're 62 and you think, oh, I'm going to take my Social Security, fantastic. Pull your statement and look at the numbers, the difference in 62 versus your full retirement age versus age 70. There's no benefit to waiting past age 70. But up until 70, it's 8% every single year. And you're not guaranteed 8% every single year in the markets. So it's a great thing to do to delay that as long as possible. And if staying in the workforce part-time, doing something just so you don't need to necessarily start Social Security, that would be a benefit. In fact, there were some studies a while back that were done, and the numbers showed that if you were at that crossroads trying to determine, start Social Security early or take money out of my retirement account, and they did all these statistics analysis and everything else, but at the end of the day, the statement was, it's better to take money out of your portfolio, because that guaranteed 8% on Social Security is going to be better. And if you pass and you have the higher benefit, then the spouse gets that higher amount. So it's important to, again, talk to an advisor or specialist and have them look at your statements, have them look at, your whole financial picture, and determine when it makes sense. But it almost never makes sense to take it at 62. There are situations, that do arrive. But if at all possible, wait till you're 67. And at the end of the day, I would say, just like I said, pull your statements and look at the math.
So I'm sure my simple math, it can't be accurate, but if you get 8% a year for 10 years, is that 80% higher Social Security if you wait the 10 years?
It's 80% of your value. So you would have to look, and it's going to change every year. I mean, the 8% doesn't change, but the value of the dollar amount is going to change. So it's 8% per year on whatever that balance is. So 8% over 8%.
So if I were to get $1,000 in Social Security at 62 and I waited a year, that'd be an extra $80, right?
Right. And then
And then the
80%
next year is
or
1,080 at 8%,
8%, right?
86. Okay. So it actually would be more than 80% increase.
So you would do that math. I'm not sure what that math actually works out to be from, and you know what the cool thing is, the Social Security website has calculators, so you can go on there and run these kind of scenarios. If I start early, if I wait till later, what that looks like and
No,
what.
yeah, I mean, you're just doing the rough numbers, but yeah, it is, almost 80%,
Almost
a little bit
80%.
higher because it's accruing, it's 8% of a higher amount each time, but
Yeah.
I can,
Yeah, it's something that most people don't think about. It's like, oh, 62, I'm going to quit and run and, pull my Social Security. Now we had some clients who there was health issues and their anticipated lifespan was not going to be, you know, 70 or 75. So it might make sense in that case to potentially pull it early because you won't make that money back per se. We did the math calculations, and for the most part, the break-even point was at about 82, 83 years. So if you're going to live past 83 years old, your benefit is to wait to age 70. But again, pull your statement and look at those numbers. You'll be surprised.
yeah. Do you help people look at their Social Security benefits and the calculators, and is that part of what you do?
Generally speaking, no. I do educate on how to do that. If I'm doing one-on-one with a client, we'll look at their statement and we can have that conversation. But in the overall Minding Her Money program, I don't get into the Social Security analysis per se. But if I'm working one-on-one with a client, and that's one of their concerns, then we can go on to their statement together, analyze it, have conversation, and determine if it makes sense. But I won't give advice. I can't give advice as a coach. As an advisor, I could. And a financial advisor can take a look at their entire situation from a tax perspective, their tax returns, throw it into a software, do the calculations, run the scenarios. And that gets into the weeds far, far greater than what I do.
No, that makes sense. There are probably other people that specialize in just that sector of that process with Social Security.
Yes, there were definitely those experts out there, and we had a couple that we refer to. But when I was doing the financial advisor role in our firm, we would take their tax returns, we'd upload it to a software, we would run some scenarios in there, and we would sit down with them and kind of show the plan, their financial plan, along with this, tax software, and we would give some recommendations with regards to here's where it makes sense to pull the trigger and start Social Security, or it doesn't. If they were married, if they were single, everyone's situation is different, so there's no one size fits all when it comes to that. But that does get into the advice hat, which I can't do.
Yeah, I was just taking some notes here. Does with you specializing in single and divorced women, what are some parallels and maybe complete differences as far as not advice as we know that word, but as far as financial planning, like retirements and all that? Is there some things that are completely different than what you would tell a married couple versus a single woman?
The money rules are the money rules. They're all the same. However, if you're dealing with a woman who's alone and there's one source of income and there's one Social Security, and potentially, due to the gender gap, there was less income, potentially because she was out of the workforce because she was raising kids, her Social Security is going to be lower. Those various factors can be that she's a little behind the eight ball when it comes to that piece of it. So that's where it becomes a little bit more challenging. They don't have that, security of a nice Social Security, chunk coming every month. Probably no pension. And again, that's not necessarily for everyone. There's a lot of executive women, career women who have, lovely full-time jobs and went back to work after having kids. And so that doesn't apply. But for those that, were at home and they, were out of the workforce for 20 years, their Social Security is going to look different than somebody who was in the workforce. So again, it's a very individual situation. It's one of those where you've got to unpack the entire story and look at the numbers and really understand the full picture before you can make any kind of recommendations. My focus more is education, and here's what you need to look at. Here's the questions you want to ask your advisor. Here's the holes that I see, and here's where we can, we got to focus on. And that's kind of that thing. But the answer to your question, no. I mean, again, it's the money rules are the money rules. Not going to apply to everybody.
I think we were trying to, a few weeks ago, I was trying to ask you some specific questions to kind of drill down on an example, but there's so many variables. I think you said, how much, what is their income? How much longer do they have to invest? We're trying to talk about the difference between Roth and traditional, and that your advice really would depend on so many other factors. You couldn't really just say, well, unless we came up with an example of a person with certain criteria that you could then kind of be more specific, right?
Yeah, there's just so many moving parts and things that are variable, like you said, to the person's story, that there really is no one. I mean, there is no one financial plan that fits everybody. Everybody's situation is so unique. And again, I just shared the story about somebody who had a positive cash flow, that they would never touch their portfolio, and the size of their portfolio isn't necessarily as important. I mean, if they had $2 million and they would never touch it, that's a great thing. But if you've got somebody with, $2 million and they're pulling out 10 grand a month to, live their lifestyle or pay their bills or whatever, the health of that plan is going to be different depending upon when they start to pull money out of that. And when that money will run out, so there's some of those calculations. And again, it's just really understanding their situation, and that requires a very detailed conversation.
I have a tip and a trick that I wanted to share.
Okay.
For if you're going to be single or divorced, marry Kevin Costner. Have you heard that one?
The size of that divorce settlement?
No, that's what she wants in child support per month, $250,000
per month.
Per month.
Wow.
Just so she can. So I didn't read into the details of it, but it's been all over for the last couple of days. But
I didn't see that.
Just so she can sustain her standard of living, which is the terminology that is used in the courts, is the standard of living. And so they're saying that this might be one of the most expensive divorces. And they ranked them. There was a rank. I should have pulled that up too, but there was a rank of, I think Mel Gibson was like 450 million or something like that. And Kevin Costner's last divorce, I guess he's been married now 18 years to this gal, but that one was 80 million payout. So,
oof.
Yeah.
Oof. That's painful.
Yeah.
Well,
so anyway,
for him,
that's my tip. That was my advice.
Yeah. Oh my heavens. That's another conversation, but boy, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So today we're talking how to pump up your retirement if you're single or divorced. I have some people asking questions about divorce judgments being rejected. We're not talking about those today, but I have been doing live streams recently where I'm just making myself available, either talking about something like we're doing now, and then sometimes just leaving up a screen to run for 2 or 3 hours with the live stream going, and people eventually find me and ask questions. But Amelia, go to divorce661.com and schedule a consultation with me, and we can talk about fixing your judgment, as long as you guys are amicable and cooperative, and we'll sign off on the paperwork. Anything can be fixed. So I'll just leave that at that. What else do you have for me, Patti? How are we going to make your future potential coaching clients wealthy?
Well, let me before I go there, let me make another point about just staying active in retirement when it comes to, being purposeful and working. And it's the contributions to society. We have that inner joy and feeling when we are serving and we're contributing to society somehow. So if even if you're not working a 9 to 5, if you can take your skill set and take your knowledge that you've acquired over decades of work and somehow help, maybe you're going to mentor somebody in college, maybe you're going to volunteer at some nonprofit, but be doing something with that knowledge and that experience is a beautiful thing, whether you're paid or not. It just allows you to feel fulfilled. And another reason why, yes, retirement can be great as long as you're not sitting on the couch, watching TV all day.
Excuse me, what's wrong with sitting on the couch watching TV? That's my favorite thing to do.
I'll have to talk to Ellie about that. You know what? In moderation.
She loves it too.
In moderation. I enjoy it too. Hey, my friends know that I'm a Hallmark junkie. I get it. However, it's a moderation.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. I know, and that's not you. I
know. There's got to be limitations. Like I don't feel like watching TV on the couch when it's a beautiful day outside at 2 p.m. on a Saturday.
Right.
You got the blinds closed. That doesn't make sense unless it's like it was Monday, 100 degrees.
Yeah. I have a hard time on the weekends. I don't think I ever put the TV on the weekends during the day. It's like I need to be out doing something.
No.
If it's sunny, especially, it's like, get me out of the house. But my downtime is in the evening for sure.
Another thing we could talk about, you're talking about mental health and all that. You talk about TV on the weekends, just probably don't stream the news all day would probably be good.
Oh, yeah.
When you were talking about that, my mom's been retired she could be your client. My dad passed away, I think 15 years ago. So she's been on her own ever since. Thankfully, his retirement passed to her. I had some clause that she could do that. And they had a house she was able to sell. And so she's fine. Social Security and all that. But she literally, whenever I call or she calls me, all you hear is news in the background. And she said she watches the news, like it's just on. She just has a TV on the news all day. So if you're getting that kind of crap in your ear, that's probably not helping
that's raising your fear. That's raising, for sure. I know a lot of people like having the TV on just to have noise in the background, and that's fine. Put on something light and something funny or whatever, but don't watch the news. I never watch the news. I just I just won't. I'll get the important stuff, where I need to get my important information, but it's just they feed off the fear. So tell her no. Tell your mom no, Tim.
I know. Well, that's what came to mind. It's funny because I always think of something when we're having these conversations. Of neighbors or family or whatnot. That's all right. Funny. What's next?
Let's see. We talked about the financial stability, the purpose and the meaning. I wanted to talk about just having that identity fulfillment, mental stimulation, social connections. Talk about that, the health benefits. So we didn't talk about the health benefits per se, because that we're talking about more of the financial and stuff. But the health benefits is staying active, physically and mentally. If you're at work, you get up in the morning, you got to take a shower, you got to do your thing, you go to the office, you're walking around, you're physically active. That's just healthy all the way around. So from a physical health, it's also good too, even if it's part-time. I love to use this example, but Trader Joe's, there's so many, what seems to look like retired individuals who work at Trader Joe's who are all very happy. They're all just, very, very happy. So I'm not sure what their package is, their pay package, but they're all in good moods all the time. And they work hard, right? They're standing there checking out or packing shelves and they're working. And so that's good too. I think we covered everything on my list. Just from a financial perspective, like I said, the Social Security is important to analyze. Make sure you don't pull that too early. Making sure that you don't tap into your retirement assets before you have to. The RMD age of 73. I hear it's going to go to 75 in a few years, so that's going to probably change.
Is that good or bad, Patti, for that to go up? Is that?
It's good, I think. because the
Okay.
government's letting you keep that money working, in a retirement type deferred growth, package. So I think it's good. If you don't need it, you don't need it. Let it continue to grow. If you need it, that's a different story. You can pull it, and it's no problem. The other thing I will just say, if you're working with a financial advisor and you're coming up on, that if you're in the 60s and you're, 10 years away from that RMD, explore Roth conversions and have a conversation with your advisor about Roth conversions, because if you can take some of that IRA and put it into a Roth, knowing that Roth is not RMD, and that money now grows tax free. That's a better thing. So you might be in a lower bracket in your later years if you're not working or you have part-time income. So a conversion is not as painful, because when you do a Roth conversion, that conversion amount is ordinary income for that year. So it's going to bump you. So if you're a high tax bracket, that probably it may or may not make sense depending upon your situation. But have them look at that for you as well as a possibility, just so you can move your money to a tax-free account from a tax-deferred account.
And this might be off the topics you wanted to go down, but when you said health benefits, you're talking about working out and so forth. My mind went to insurance. Like when people leave their jobs and leave their retirement, and to say they don't have medical, what are you seeing? I don't know if you have experience with that portion. Are people losing their life savings because of some medical event because they didn't have traditional health care coverage?
Well,
I mean,
it's
that directly
65.
affects their financial well-being, or could.
Yes, for sure. But at 65, you get Medicare. So when you can then apply for Medicare, and that basically is your insurance. And then there's Medicare supplement packages. We also had a Medicare specialist that would oftentimes talk to our clients. But that is basically replacing the insurance that you'd have at your employer.
If I have to hear Medi-Cal one more time, because as I said, we watch a lot of TV, but I don't know what parts of the year. There's only like 2 months where they're not playing those Medi-Cal commercials.
There's open
Part A,
enrollment.
Part B, showing the
Yeah.
the Martha. I don't know if you ever saw the Martha commercials. There's I want
Oh
my
yeah.
increase or my extra pay.
She's all angry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is a lot of moving parts to Medicare, and it's not super clear. And there's the Part A and the Part B and the Part D, and then there's the vision and the dental, and then there's the Medicare Advantage, and then there's there's all these different things that you can get supplement.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to speak, and I have a referral if anybody wants one, to a Medicare specialist. I am not a Medicare specialist. I know enough to kind of guide you, but I certainly do not know all the ins and outs. And our firm would actually refer out to this gal as well. She's brilliant. She lives and breathes and eats Medicare. And yes, certain times of the year she's swamped because it's open enrollment and things are happening. But there are certain rules to Medicare. You've got to apply to Medicare within a certain period of your 61st birthday. And if you don't, there's a penalty, a stiff penalty. So you've got to know when to apply. I think it's 90 days before, 90 days after your 65th birthday. And if you don't, it's trouble. So you definitely want to be on that as you approach the big 65 for sure.
Yeah. I wonder if there must be confusion in regards to that with those commercials, and those folks they're advertising. They're obviously an insurance company that gets paid for placing them into the Medi-Cal program. There seems to be a bunch of them out there too, big ones that are doing these ads year round. I'm just not sure. I don't know if you know or not, but it's just I'm curious as why they're all fighting for that business.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that, because I believe, like, my contact that I have, her name is Mary. I believe Mary gets paid by, I'm not sure who she gets paid by, but it's not a cost to the person that calls and gets her help.
Right.
So it's there's no risk, and she's like a broker, insurance broker, and she gets paid on the other side. So I don't know. Again, that's not my area of specialty, but it's nice to know that you have these individuals who you can talk to. That's why they see these commercials. Oh yeah, call it no obligation and no cost to you and all this stuff. I think it truly is no cost to you. I don't like some of the hard sales that they have, but absolutely get your, do your due diligence and get that knowledge as you approach that. And don't even wait till you're 65. I mean, start at your 64th birthday, start to sniff around and get some of that knowledge. So when you're at that point, you can just pull the trigger and you're done and you just know what you're doing.
Yeah, planning ahead definitely makes sense. So
Yeah.
we talked Medi-Cal, or I'll call Medi-Cal, Social Security. We touched on that. We talked about health and well-being,
Did you want to talk about the quadros?
staying active. Yeah, we can do that. We can talk quadros.
That's your
It's funny. Neither of us give legal advice. Um,
right.
I am able to get away with saying certain things if it's a known published article written by an attorney, right? Like if you reference it, essentially. So I was just before we set this before we started having this conversation today, I asked our good friend ChatGPT,
Our
and
buddy.
honestly, it's better than reading a blog or a site from an attorney on it. And here's what it says. It says, when going through a divorce in California, it is important to understand the following key aspects regarding retirement plans. Community property. California is a community property state, which means that any assets acquired during the marriage are generally considered community property and subject to equal division between spouses upon divorce. This includes retirement plans accumulated during the divorce. So, one thing, and I'll continue on about the quadro, what that is. But one thing about that with like my clients, they think that community property is only things that are in their name. Not all of them. Just this is a misconception people have, that it's only community property if it's in both their names. So there's always this concern like, oh, the house was in my spouse's name, not mine. So he told me I don't get any of the house. And so, obviously that's not true. Same with the retirement. They'll say, well, we have nothing together. That's how they'll phrase it, the language. We have nothing together. So they're including the retirement accounts, and they'll say, well, do you guys have retirement? And say, yes, but he has his and I have mine. They're not together, or, my name's not, whatever their language is.
Mhm.
But that all is community property. And then point number 2. So talking about qualified domestic relations order, says a quadro is a court order that divides retirement benefits between divorcing spouses. It is essential to obtain a quadro to divide retirement accounts such as 401ks, pensions, and IRAs, as it allows for tax-free transfers of retirement assets and helps ensure that each spouse receives their fair share. And I think that's a big part of it. We'll have folks they'll have this pre-planned discussion, before they realize that the quadros are here to have this non-taxable event quadro process, and they're almost at the point, some of them, of cashing out a portion to give to their spouse from either their 401k or otherwise, and not realizing that there are these quadro procedures that allows for it to move from one account to the other, essentially tax-free as a result of the divorce. So
Yeah, I would recommend working with a CDFA, which is a certified divorce financial analyst. So they are a financial planner who has an additional certification in that, and that includes a lot of that analysis. They don't do the quadro for you, but they will review everything and give some advice and suggestions and whatnot. And so look for those, CDFA, look for those initials if you're needing some assistance with that.
yeah, I was surprised. I don't know if I mentioned last time we spoke that I've interviewed a few CDFAs recently, and one of them actually would do, as part of her role, would do the pension valuation like an actuarial would, to
Oh.
to determine uh, their community property portion for purposes of an overall settlement. So they could see, okay, we're going to take those valuations into effect or into account related to maybe offsets for other assets or something like that, to see if it makes sense to do a quadro or something like that. So that was surprising. And this person, kind of like you, also only worked with one side, the woman in the divorce. and they're just to provide that information so they can go into their negotiations with their attorney knowing what those facts are and what those numbers are, because you can't count on an attorney to know those numbers, to
Right.
be an actuarial service or do valuations. And she was saying, the CDFA was saying that another big mistake that people are making when it comes to pensions is um, they're looking at the balance on the statement and thinking that that's the value of the pension, when all that really is the contributions of the employee side of things. And where originally they were going to waive that amount, there's so much more value in that pension long term.
Having that understanding and that's huge, because that could be an expensive mistake if someone doesn't understand that.
Yeah, for sure. So that's basically the quadro. It gets very detailed into the different ways you can take your money time rule or have the valuations done. But I guess that's the biggest point on the quadros is that that's a tool. It's a core process that occurs after the divorce is finalized that uh, is drawn up, and it's really just the language that follows the order of the divorce decree, indicating you know how that's going to be divided. And usually it's simply to say, if it's a traditional retirement, it's to say something to the effect of, spouse A is to receive, her community property share and spouses B's pension, and that's just determined between the date of marriage and date of separation. So that's kind of just the standard language. And the quadro will be, a 4 to 12 page document that will spell out the specifics of how that gets handled. Whereas with 401ks, we're seeing clients want to do fixed amounts in some cases, as opposed to community property share. Maybe they're going to use it as a offset towards a house, instead of, maybe one spouse wanted to keep the house and they didn't want to do the, a buyout per se, or maybe they couldn't, they are doing a buyout, but they couldn't get the full amount. And so they will, instead of doing a community property division, they'll say, well, he or she would have got 100,000, but we're going to do a flat fee of 150,000 because they're using that additional monies as an offset, which people aren't aware that that's possible, that you can, you don't have to literally divide everything equally down the line, when you can keep other assets and debts to offset each other.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the end of the day, if both parties agree on the division of assets, even if it's not 50-50, like you said, I'll take the house, you take your pension, I'll take this, you take that. If they both agree, then there's nothing to have an argument about, right? They can do whatever they want.
Yeah, the courts are not looking at the level of fairness of the agreement. We're submitting in this case, a full settlement agreement that they've signed off and notarized. The courts are making sure that it was the paperwork was done properly, I's dotted, T's crossed, and the process was followed procedurally correctly. But what you guys agree, what parties agree to, they could care less.
Yeah, that makes sense, because there's so many things, interwoven in with that. And if they're both happy, then let it be. Yeah.
And to the other extreme, where we have one side saying, well, there's nothing together, we have the other side that is literally looking at the letter of the law of everything's divided equally, where we had, they had, say, 10 credit cards, 3 401ks, bank accounts, and all that stuff. And when they sent me their proposed agreement that they had tried to put through the court and was rejected for other reasons, but they were dividing everything. Like, if it was a $5,000 credit card, 25. It was a $80 credit card, it was 40 and 40. And I said, why are you, anyways, so I just filled them in that wasn't mandatory. And it just made the process for them so much easier, because they're like, well, we really just wanted to keep, I'm going to keep my assets and debts, and my spouse is going to keep theirs. We didn't want to do this, but we thought we had to. So just a lot of misunderstanding in the process regarding that.
Which makes sense. I mean, if you haven't gone through a divorce, how would you know? I mean, it's like there's nothing in school about
Yeah. When I read, like I'll go to, I work with all the counties in California, and I'll just check if we have maybe a county I haven't filed in a while, or I'll just make sure there wasn't any policy changes or processing changes, or a local form that might be different, or they added. And I'll read some of the language on the court website, and I know what I'm doing, and I'm like, what are they talking about? Like it doesn't even make sense sometimes. I think that's why people get so confused.
Oh yeah, yeah, the legal mumbo jumbo, and I see that in the financial world too. The jargon and the things. It's like,
Oh
let's
yeah,
just keep it simple. So
and you've
yeah,
seen it from a mortgage person to a financial person, so you got a bunch of those rules bouncing around in your head.
I do, and there's always changes. I was talking to a friend of mine recently about some of the changes in the legal the lending world, and the underwriting guidelines are changing and the products are changing, and so I've been out of that for a number of years now, and but again, I know the basics, but there's no way to stay on top of everything if you're out of it. If I haven't done a loan in
Right.
years, I'm not going to know latest and greatest. But yeah, I think it's important to, again, it kind of comes back to our original, topic of just maybe not today's conversation, but in the past, of doing due diligence, doing your homework, talking to people, getting yourself, before you make any decision moving forward, make sure that you understand the picture and then make your choices very cautiously and carefully.
Yeah. Well, that's all I had for you today for the Quadro side.
Okay.
Patty, was there anything else you want to touch on?
No, I think that if, we just know that, society tells us one thing to do, but your retirement's your retirement. Do what you want. And there's no number that's magical. There's no, do whatever you want. And then I'll close with this. I also read this when I was, sometime back when I was researching the retirement stuff. Um, don't wait until your retirement to figure things out. Like several years prior to retirement, start to have a game plan. So when you do officially, walk out the door of your employer, that you don't like, okay, now what? You have that all laid out. You know exactly what you're doing, whether it's volunteering, going part-time, starting your own business, traveling, whatever it is, you have this game plan. So the transition isn't black and white. You don't like, oh, what the heck now? You know exactly what you're doing the day you walk out that door. And so that way there's less of a shock to the system because you've already planned for this.
Perfect advice as always, Patty. Thanks again for joining us, and we will get you next time.
All
So
right.
next time we
Thanks,
chat.
Tim.
All righty.